Ever wonder why some individuals seem to pull away the moment real love or attachment come knocking? Enter the mind of an avoidant attachment style and their unique patterns when it comes to real intimacy and closeness. Today, in this video, we're going to do a deep dive into why avoidant attachment styles do seem to have some deep feelings of caution when it comes to love. But more than that, we will talk about how the avoidant attachment style actually experiences romantic feelings. Now, this doesn't come from me personally. This actually comes from discussions I've had with more than 18,000 one-to-one or couples counseling sessions where I've really gathered the data and information in terms of what the avoidant experience really boils down to. So in this video, we're going to cover a very brief reminder of what the attachment style is in 1 to 2 sentences if you are new to this channel. And if you are, hello and welcome. And then we'll talk about how the avoidant experiences romance in particular. And last but not least, the most important part, what you can do if you're the avoidant or loved one of an avoidant and want to help make this process a little bit smoother. So if you are new here, my name is Thais. I'm so glad that you stopped by, and I put basically daily videos out here on YouTube all about the different attachment styles. And what I'm going to do right now is actually pull up a share screen just so you can see for yourself some of the key points that we're going to cover in a slide format. So if you're not already familiar, this is what an avoidant is. One of 4 major attachment styles, basically characterized by a minimization of the need for attachment and especially intimacy or anything related to too much closeness. Now, an avoidant is one of these 4 attachment styles. The other ones are the secure one, the anxious one who tends to be more needy and clingy at times, and the fearful avoidant who tends to experience both sides, that anxious side and that fear of intimacy side. They tend to sort of be hot and cold constantly in relationships. Now, an avoidant experiences romance in these different main stages. Now, these are overarching themes. They start off generally with their relationship to romance in the infatuation stage, just like anybody else. And they may be really attracted to somebody. They may feel these deep feelings of infatuation or romance towards somebody. But until vulnerability is actually required, an avoidant attachment style won't actually present too many of their fears of intimacy as a whole. In fact, they can do very well in the dating stage of relationships. That first stage is we're getting to know somebody and vet them because they end up staying in the infatuation stage. To be super clear here, I'm separating out stages of relationships from the stages of how an avoidant experiences their own romantic feelings. Okay. So they start off essentially by having this sense of infatuation as they're getting to know somebody, as they're starting to go on dates with them, vet them, build more deep conversations with them, get to know the person in deeper ways. And once they actually start to develop real feelings and more vulnerability is involved, where they're really sharing more of their inner world with somebody, this is where they start to attach. Now, it's when they actually begin to attach that things can get a little bit more hairy. This attachment stage of their feelings and emotions ends up leading to deeper bonding, but also the onset of some of their attachment related fears. And as a coping mechanism to deal with these fears, they may begin flaw finding. What is flaw finding, you ask? It's this concept where, as a subconscious strategy to feel safe, the avoidant attachment style will basically begin to try to convince themselves that they don't really need the person they're with. They will look for small flaws that they can kind of magnify as justification why if something doesn't work out or their needs can't be met or the relationship doesn't go smoothly, they're going to be totally fine and everything will be okay. Now, of course, they don't consciously realize that this is a coping mechanism coming usually from a childhood where they couldn't get their needs met in many forms. And now they're trying to convince themselves that they'll be okay if their relationships are not fulfilling or unsuccessful in the future. And then we move into this withdrawing stage, which is as they really start to feel truly vulnerable to the person they're in some sort of dating or relationship with, they begin minimizing the relationship's importance. And they begin actually withdrawing intimacy at times. This doesn't have to just be sexual intimacy. This can be emotional intimacy. This can be intellectual intimacy. This can be the intimacy of sharing space where they need to actually physically take space. And what you will see in this stage is that the avoidance tends to increase And stonewalling essentially goes on the up and up. We'll see more stonewalling in relationships as a whole. Now, I think it's important to point out that this is not a time where an avoidant is trying to do these things on purpose. Or the vast majority of the time, with the exceptions of narcissists or certain cluster B personality disorders, the avoidant is not trying to be harsh by stonewalling or withdrawing. They're not trying to control somebody or punish them or hurt them. The relationship to these habits and behaviors are that they developed these coping mechanisms once upon a time, usually in childhood. And now they're reenacting these coping mechanisms because they're afraid that they're on some subconscious level going to re-experience some of the painful events they went through in earlier years. And so, a lot of times, not only do they not intend to do anything harsh, but they do not realize the impact of their actions on other people and how those actions often get received or make another person feel. So, what can you do if you're the avoidant or loved one of an avoidant? Well, we're going to start with loved one of an avoidant. The first thing is that you want to speak up for your needs. I know that this sounds counterintuitive because a lot of individuals who end up dating avoidance are often more anxious leaning. And as a result of that, they get scared to rock the boat or be a burden or ask for anything more. But how you do it will make all of the difference. In fact, avoidants tend to do quite well in a relationship if you communicate your needs with positive framing. An example of this would be, instead of saying, "You're stonewalling, you're not spending enough time with me, you don't care about the relationship," we instead positively frame this and we say, "Hey, I'm feeling a little bit disconnected this week and would love to spend some time together. Why don't we plan something fun to do on the weekend?" And that's you expressing your needs in a positive form, which is more likely to get heard, rather than if we express in a negative frame. Okay. We end up saying, "You don't do this, you don't care." And all somebody hears is criticism. They almost never realize that what you're trying to get at is the communication of a need. And again, going back to this point where often an avoidant doesn't even realize consciously that they're doing these things, they feel like they're being criticized for what they experience as being for no reason. Again, not recognizing that there's this preceding impact of their behaviors and the way that those behaviors are being received by their loved one and how those things are landing and feeling for somebody on the other end of that experience. Now, the second thing is you want to set boundaries with coping mechanisms. Okay. Again, we want to communicate around these things in very healthy ways. So, if you see, for example, that somebody's stonewalling, okay, maybe you've had a disagreement and now the person's really icing you out. We do want to set boundaries and call this out directly. But again, how we do it will make all of the difference. So in this particular case, you would want to go to the avoidant and say something like, "Hey, I noticed that you're icing me out. And I understand you may not be ready to talk right now, and I can respect that. But I want us to be able to have a healthy, constructive conversation when you're ready. And I don't feel that us icing each other out is going to be a way to get there. So let me know when you're ready and let's hash this out." And what you're doing is, because avoidants tend to have these wounds and fears around conflict, being emotionally unsafe, being criticized, you're clearly illustrating that you are here for a healthy conversation, but you're also setting a boundary and you're saying it's not appropriate or it's not ideal or constructive for us to ice each other out. We ideally need to be talking this through. These are the behaviors I want to see. So you're calling this out directly, but in a gentle and healthy way, while also stressing the importance of having a healthy conversation, which will kind of buffer out or debunk, those original fears an avoidant often has about having conversations, because they assume a lot of the time that these conversations will end up in conflict or feeling shamed or criticized or emotionally unsafe in the conversation. Now, of course, you ideally want to follow up by also approaching the conversation in a healthy way. Last but not least, well, two last things here. You want to make sure you're maintaining safety and consistency in the relationship. Avoidants don't respond well, and they will shut down more and more and withdraw more and more if there's a lack of safety and consistency. If there's a lot of emotional volatility, arguments, harsh words, these are really big things that, especially as there's more attachment and connection in a relationship, avoidant attachment styles will tend to withdraw. And you want to encourage vulnerability. You want to encourage those open, healthy conversations. But if you're not seeing the needle move in a way that makes sense to you, if you're not seeing more vulnerability, more consistency and safety emotionally back, shifts and changes in your needs being met, or, a reduction in these unhealthy coping mechanisms, that's where you get to decide, is this the right relationship for me to stay in? And this is where I always advise people to set a deadline. If we're, no matter what the person's attachment style is, if we're not seeing the output in a relationship of our needs being met or of problems being worked through in a way that makes sense and feels good for us, that's where we have to ask ourselves the hard question: is this the relationship I really am meant to be in right now? And if that's not the case, then maybe I need to take steps in another direction and consider really taking a step back or out of this particular relationship. So these are four things you can do to start. This sort of brings up that number five. If you want to do a deeper dive into this, you can check out a course all about how to do healthy relationships with an avoidant attachment style. It's called How an Avoidant Shows Up in the Six Stages of Relationships. It's fully for free just for a limited time, and I will put that link in the description below. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of the daily content we put out here. And I can't wait to see you in future videos.